Hey, Print Hustlers, Bruce from Printavo, Simple Shop Management Software. Today we've got a very special guest, Brett Bowden from Printed Threads, founder of Printed Threads, CEO of Printed Threads. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, it's good to see you.
Awesome. Brett, just give us a little bit of background for people who haven't heard of your company. Just a synopsis where you're at, what your company's about.
Yeah, so Printed Thread started in 2010 in Fort Worth, Texas. We are mainly a screen printing shop, started in my garage, but we grew fairly quickly. And today we have a 15,000 square foot shop with 4 automatic presses and about 25 employees. And we serve started out serving the music market, so a lot of rock bands, music festivals, that type of thing. And then we've kind of spread out our focus a little bit to where we do a lot for restaurants and breweries and all kinds of people. We play in a very fun and creative market.
Awesome. What made you start in your garage? Was it just printing for yourself at first, or?
Actually, so I started screen printing in 2000. Right around the year 2000, I started a little merch company because I played in, punk rock bands growing up, and we were always making shirts. And so, being the kind of young entrepreneur-minded person that I was like, I want to figure out how to make shirts for myself, and maybe we can print shirts for other bands too. So, started doing that. At first, just brokering them out, and then I think about 2001, I bought a press, put it in a garage, in my friend's garage, and we would print T-shirts. At the time, I had moved out to California, and I was living with a buddy that owned a record label called the Militia Group, which a bunch of punk bands were on at the time. Some bands like Rufio, and the band that I played in for a little while was on the label. So we were just printing shirts for all those guys. Eventually, I was in a band that was traveling all the time, so I could no longer make shirts myself. So I sold everything off to one of my friends, and then I guess did that whole touring thing for 5 or 6 years.
Wait, do you remember what press you had before that you sold off to him?
Yeah, there was this brand called Micro Perfect. It was the Micro Perfect Rebel, and it was a really cool little press. I don't think they're in business any longer, but yeah, I love that little press. Bought it in, I think they were like based out of Rancho Cucamonga or something like that in California.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were printing and having a good time, and but I was gone all the time. And so I had to just basically sell the business to my buddy. And so he kind of took it over. He actually did a lot of really cool things in screen printing, including being R&D for a huge ink manufacturer. And he's moved on now, works for the people that we're all scared of at a company called Amazon. So he had a great has had a great print career. I kind of realized, being in that rock band, that we weren't going to be in the Rolling Stones or anything, so I decided I needed to go back to college, get a degree. So I did that. I went back to college. I got a degree in music. While I was getting that degree, I was actually working as a cable guy, which was a very great experience. And
For Comcast or like a local network in tech? Or no, where was it?
This was in Colorado, so
Okay.
It was Comcast. I would go install people's cable, and this was kind of right around like 2005, 2006, when everybody was kind of getting HD TVs, so
The plasmas and
yeah, so you'd go into someone's house and they just bought this like $2,000
yeah.
TV, and they're so stoked about it, but then they realized that like no TV networks were broadcasting in HD yet, so they just had like a really crappy signal being broadcast on their super fancy TV. Those were the times. Now no one has a regular standard definition TV anymore. They're like impossible to find.
No, and plus the price is like been cut by 75%.
Yeah, it's amazing. So yeah, I was doing that. I graduated from college in 2009 and decided that I wanted to be a teacher. And so went out looking for a teaching job and got my teaching
music
certification.
teacher, or
actually, like music or math. I really wanted to be a math teacher.
okay.
Oddly enough, and then there just weren't any jobs in 2009. We were in the middle of a recession. All the schools were on hiring freezes because they couldn't afford their budgets. And I'm left, working for a cable company, thinking, I don't like this. What am I going to do? Thought to myself, you know what? I know how to screen print. So I went home, talked to my wife, said, hey, I've got this crazy idea. Let's buy a press, put it in our garage, and we did it. And next thing you know, I'm working all day and printing T-shirts all night. And that kind of was when my dad came to me and said, Brett, if if you're printing T-shirts all night, imagine what you could be doing if you were working full time selling T-shirts. And so that's where Printed Threads really was born in 2010 in that garage on Red Velvet Road in Keller, Texas.
Wait, when was the move back? That was when you were looking for work?
Yeah.
Okay.
So right 2009. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And printing garage, what press did you have then?
I got just found a used M&R Chameleon. Just got connected. My buddy that I talked about earlier that bought my company, his name was Kevin. He was very friendly to help me kind of get restarted and connected me with a bunch of people. In fact, he was the guy that told me at this trade show, he's like, you got to go meet Nick Wood at Ryonet, because Nick Wood is really into BMX, which is something that we were all into growing up,
Yeah.
And, sometimes you go to the trade show and you make up, like, I didn't even have a company yet, right? So I just made up a fake name. I put Crew Jones, which is the star of the movie Rad. And it's funny because whenever Nick Wood saw it, he got all excited because he's a BMXer. So I gave him my Crew Jones badge, and he reminds me yearly that he still has that badge.
That's awesome.
So it just connected me with all these people in the industry, and it kind of gave me a leg up, I guess, because I was meeting all these vendors, I was learning all this information and being educated about new ink technologies. That's when water-based was becoming really popular, but no one really knew how to print it. So we just dove right in and started learning as much as we could.
Interesting. So it almost sounds like going to that trade show or just any trade show really early on just really helped open your eyes a lot.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you're surrounded by peers, and I'm an extrovert, right? I love meeting new people. I love talking to people. I mean, we've been at bars together late at night, and I just love talking to people. It's what energizes me, and so I can imagine if I was more of an introvert that would not sound fun at all.
Yeah.
But I've always had a good time going to trade shows. It's amazing what you can learn from someone in 5 minutes, and I just love learning. And so I think trade shows are an amazing experience to learn more and more about your industry.
For sure. Yeah, that's a really good point. I remember when we were printing, I had no idea what ISS, MBM, anything was. It was just like literally don't burn the shirts and get the artwork approved and keep moving forward. But that's awesome. That's actually a really good tip for people, especially because I believe ISS is just free if you just put in a company's name as the code. So very cool.
It's free. You might have to pay for your travel or whatever. And I think people let that be like, oh man, I don't want to spend the money on a hotel or flying or whatever. But, I went to college, right? I spent who knows how much money or how college costs at this point,
Sure.
And I went to college and I took all these classes and they have nothing to do with what I do now. So for me to spend $500 to go gain a whole bunch of knowledge on what I do every day as a job, I think is a great investment.
Right. Yeah, 100%. So actually, tell me about that process of going full time. You talk about it like, oh, I was just a cable guy, but it's still more of a solid paycheck. You know what to do tomorrow, you know what's going on today, and you know where your paycheck's coming from.
Yeah, man, it's super scary, right? You have to figure out okay, what is the plan? How are we going to live? And at the time I had 2 kids. I have 3 kids now, but I have 2 kids. Luckily my wife was working and she had a good job. And so we kind of just sat together and said, hey, do we believe in this, right? You have to have buy-in from both people because if she didn't believe in it and I did, certainly we'd have some sort of conflicts there. But she believed in it and I believed in it. She committed. She said, I'm going to go to work and make money for us, and you do the best you can to build the company. And at some point, it'll be great for both of us. So we did. We said, okay, I buy in. I'm leaving my job. You're going to provide money for us. You make X amount a year. I think that we can live off of it. So Sarah did all the couponing. So she would cut out coupons and make sure that we bought our groceries really cheap. We would do, Chick-fil-A does this thing where they open up a new store. The first 100 people to line up and camp out overnight get free Chick-fil-A for a year. So we did 5 or 6 of those.
Oh my gosh.
We ever ate out. The only time we ever ate out for dinner, we went to Chick-fil-A.
Holy cow, that's a print hustler mentality.
Totally. And so I kid you not, it took me a really long time to be able to eat Chick-fil-A again after that whole experience, because it just reminds me of the struggle,
Right.
No, I mean, we're committed, and at some points, I think I didn't take a paycheck from Printed Threads for 2 years. And so I think about 2.5 years in, I started taking a paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, when I was able to take that paycheck, it was about the amount of money that my wife was making at her job.
Mm-hmm.
And we just sat down. We'd actually just had our third child. And we sat down. We were talking about childcare. What are we going to do? It was the day before she was going back to work after having our third child. And I just looked at her and I said, don't go to work. We
Wait, was
know
she a teacher too?
she was a registered
Oh,
nurse.
okay, okay.
So I guess she is a registered nurse. But I looked at her. I was like, don't go to work. We know what the struggle is like. We know that we can do it. And all it's going to do is take away from our ability to like love on our kids more because we're going to be dropping them off somewhere all the time. And so I was like, dude, let's just be poor and have an awesome family, you know? And so
Yeah.
we committed to doing that. And obviously, you know, Printed Threads has grown and grown, and I'm able to take care of my family a whole lot better now than I used to be able to. But yeah, that was kind of the process of like, I'm going to quit my job. You're going to support me. We're going to get to the point where we can flip flop and I can support you. Here we are, you know, eight years later. It's a pretty remarkable situation.
I want to go back to that because this was my actual whole topic around this was mindset and what you're thinking and going through. I think a lot of other shop owners have all these different stories and background, but people relate in different ways, which is exciting. But, you know, when your wife was about to go back to work, you had a third kid, and you guys were having this discussion, was the thought process, okay, hey, we can work on this company together? Or was it like, you know, it was very important to be there for your family more so? Like, what were you thinking about the pros and cons there a little bit more?
Well, I think the big deal was the family. You know, at the time I had a 3-year-old daughter and a 5-year-old son. So a 5-year-old son is basically, that's kindergarten, right? So she wanted to homeschool and she'd always had a passion for homeschooling. And this is a lot to juggle, you know, and just the time trying to take kids to daycare and the amount of money that we're going to spend on daycare, does it really make sense? And then, yeah, like we can now work together on some things. You know, Sarah's always been my sounding board. You know, she's like the rational thinker and I'm the dreamer.
Sure.
And so I'm always saying, yeah, we could do this or we could do that. And she's like, okay, well, I don't think that's a good idea, but that sounds like a really good idea, you know? And so we've worked together like that. We still do that. I come home and I have an idea or she has an idea and we like, you know, try to make them come together. She has never been like, obviously she's not like a printer or anything, but she's always kind of been like a helpful, a really supportive person, you know, to me. We've played with the idea of her coming to work in the company over the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, it's a much different monster now than it was when it was just in our garage. She's got a lot going on, and I've got a lot going on, and sometimes I feel like it's better if I can like not have to. I bring home work with me anyway, but if both of us were bringing work home with us, maybe it would be more stressful. So I don't know.
Got it.
We
Like
have
hard to
plans
separate
on that.
work versus your personal life.
Yeah, exactly. And so let's see. One day maybe it'll work out. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah. That's interesting. It's interesting to think about. I mean, so many print shops are family started. The dynamics make it interesting, especially with kids and wives and others as they grow. Talk to me about the move from garage to actual location. That's a serious step, right? That's like, I feel like people celebrate that one, maybe like the first auto, first $1 million. Like those are some big steps. What were you thinking about, or what prompted you to move?
Yeah, so my dad is a businessman. He's retired now, but he's been president or CEO or some high tier executive management person for a long time. And right about the time that I decided to kind of take the leap, he certainly kind of helped initiate it. He was basically saying, you should do this. I believe in you or whatever. And so he actually kind of came alongside me and invested a little bit of his money into the company, and we were partners for a short while. And so he was kind of the one that helped like say, hey, let's go get a building. He kind of helped with that big vision at first. So we went and looked at a bunch of buildings, and I was kind of being a little bit conservative, like, hey, there's this 1,000 square foot building here and it costs this much. And he found this much bigger 2,500 square foot building down the street, and it was a pretty good deal. And he's basically saying, hey, what happens when you grow? If you're in that 1,000 square foot facility, like it's going to be really hard. You're going to have
You
to
got to move again.
Yeah, and so we really lucked out. The building that we ended up in is this 2,500 square foot building, but even as we were able to grow, we were just able to knock down walls in our existing building and just grow into the space of the entire building because we just had one out of four suites in the
Okay.
building.
Was it like, did you guys lease it or
Yeah,
purchase it?
so
Okay.
it's always been a lease. So yeah, like he really helped out with that kind of like, get a space. Like, listen, if your business is really going to operate as a business, you need to be out of the house. You need to be able to receive, truck shipments. You need to, you're thinking about this kind of big picture stuff. If your business is going to be successful, then run it like a real business,
Sure.
So that was kind of like that big push, and we kind of operated it as a partnership for about a year. But my vision for the company and the branding and everything that we were doing was just a little bit different from his. And so at some point we decided like, hey, I'm just going to take it. I'll pay you back your investment and everything. And I'm just going to kind of take it on my own.
Got it. His mindset seemed very beneficial, especially early on, to you to say, think a little bit bigger and plan for this a little bit longer term. Is there anything else that you remember that was really interesting about his guidance that helped you steer you on the right path?
Ryan Moore and I joke about this all the time because, like, when you first start your business, you're just thinking, okay, I just need to make a little bit of money and then pay for the stuff that I bought, and then I'll have money, right?
Sure, sure.
And but the bigger picture there is like, let's look at a P&L sheet. Let's look at all the business statistics and all that stuff. And so my dad, being president, CEO, and all that of giant companies, knew that, and so he was always looking at, okay, put together this budget, put together your pro forma, let's look at your P&L and let's plan, and so that really helped out. Otherwise, I don't think I would have known what a P&L was, without his kind of business guidance. And so those things were super important. Like I said, I'm a little bit of a dreamer. I'm like hopelessly optimistic, like whenever something goes wrong, I'm usually like, it'll be okay. We'll figure out the plan. I certainly have my conservative side, which is this like, kind of, let's draw back to reality. Like, if this whole business fails, what's next? And so I'm always thinking about that kind of stuff. But having someone to kind of ground you in the facts of business and how a business operates, which is something that he was able to do, was super valuable.
Got it. Very cool. There's a good book that I was going through called Traction, which actually kind of mentioned when you were talking about where there's kind of two people in that business, which is one is the dreamer and kind of pointing the vision and where the boat should go. And the other one is at home executing and is more on the operational side to keep things grounded, like you say, which is hit a bell when you mentioned that. It's the exact same thing that they were talking about.
Well, and fast forward to now, like a few years ago, well, for years I've been taking business leadership classes, and we have this group of people that gets together once a month that are all own different businesses. And for years they were saying, Brett, you got to get an operations manager. Like, you need that for your business. And so it's been 2.5 years, I guess. I hired a guy. He's our VP of operations. His name's Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
And he's that guy. He's the rational person that's like, I come in after, I'm gone a lot. So I come in after a trip and I'm like, why does this look like that? And why is, and he's bringing me back to practicality. He's like, Brett, we were really busy while you were gone. Or like, he's actually has a degree in mathematics too. So he's like a very functional, like, hey, 4 + 4 always has to equal 8, and I'm like, well, sometimes it equals 9, right? He's like, no, never does 4 + 4 equal 9. And so, he kind of draws me back to reality. So that's kind of the person that kind of pulled in that role. And I think that's really important. There's always a yin and a yang,
Sure. That's awesome. And one thing we were just talking about yesterday was also extreme optimism, which seems to be a commonality across shop owners, right? It doesn't make sense to open a screen printing shop. It doesn't make sense to keep doing it and they go full time. Like it's against odds per se, right? But that extreme optimism just keeps driving things forward, which is really cool to see. Really quick, before I get off on a tangent though, you mentioned business owner group that was very helpful monthly. Is that a local thing or is that part of the local government, or how did you find that?
So the one that I'm a part of is a small local thing called XM Performance, but there's something like this everywhere. There's one called Vistage, which Ryan Moore is a member of. It's a little bit more expensive and maybe for higher level. There's one called entrepreneurs organization, or a lot of people call it EO. I think there's, each one of these has some limitations as far as who's allowed to be involved in it.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember exactly with EO. You have to either have a $1 million or $2 million business in order to be able to be a part of the group.
Sure.
But I think if you looked up business leadership or anything like that in your area, you could probably find some sort of organization to be involved in. It's usually not cheap. They really want you to commit financially and physically. So like it's a big deal if you miss, right? They want full participation. So if I'm traveling, which we are meeting next week, while we'll be at SGIA, unfortunately, so I'll be on the conference call in, because it's very important when one person in that organization or one person in your group is dealing with a big problem, they want to have everybody's input. And while we all run different businesses. Like I'm running a screen printing business. There's a law office in there. There's a giant construction company in there. There's a big health care organization in this class. We all do very different things, but we all deliver a product or a service, and we all have customers, and we all have employees.
Sure.
And so while we're delivering a much different product, we are still dealing with the same situations.
Interesting. That sounds super helpful. Actually, something I want to look into as well. So, moved into the first facility, super excited. You're planning and you're busting down walls to be able to grow there. I'm assuming that you bought another press at that point or soon after?
Yeah, as soon as we moved into the space, we bought an automatic press. And so we had one manual press and one automatic press.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think 6 months after that, we bought another automatic press.
Wow.
And so I had a friend tell me about buying an automatic press. He's like, listen, like you're going to go buy an automatic press because you need to be able to get your work done a little bit faster. But as soon as you have more capacity, more people are going to come to you too. So there might have been these orders that people called in and said, hey, can I have 500 shirts tomorrow, that before you wouldn't have been able to produce, but now you'll be able to have the capacity to produce it. I mean, that's awesome. That definitely happened to us. And we grew very fast. Like you've had Justin Lawrence on your
from Oklahoma Shirt Company.
So we did not grow as fast as him, and I doubt any screen printing company will ever again. That is not like BC. I mean, that is just complete insanity. But we grew from $0 to $2.5 million in 4 years, which not many companies grow that fast and that aren't funded, right? So We're pulling everything together by our bootstraps. When I heard Justin's story, I was like, really felt bad about myself, but then I remember, no, he's like a cosmic, like something else, like it's a different world for him.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, in that growth, when you bought the first few presses, or really first two, did you pay cash or did you take out a loan for them? Or
yeah, so from the very beginning, I was maybe 29, still paying off school loans, like really didn't have a lot of money. We started our family really early, and so we were always just kind of like, we had saved some money, right? Like, but just not enough to like really invest into a company.
Sure.
And so we went to the bank and got a $10,000 loan in the very beginning. So that helped us pay for our initial setup. And then whenever we bought our automatic press, I believe leased that, and so we've always kind of financed stuff, which, is bitter. At the very end of it, when, your 5 years of financing is up and you look at how much interest you paid, you're like, oh my gosh, but that sucks. But, it's maybe just the cost of doing business. And as we grow, the hope is, you pay off stuff and then you have several years in between when you pay off something and when you need to buy the next one so that you can save that money and pay cash for the next one.
Sure. Is that the goal, or do you think you'll still use, because the interest rate, right, is allowing you to use capital elsewhere, right? So it's like the cost of, it's the cost of you borrowing the money to be able to technically have better cash flow. But you say to be able to save more, I guess I should back up. Is there plans to have another press in the near future?
Well, to your last point, if you spend all your cash, you don't have any cash anymore. And cash flow is what does cripple businesses. Any growing business, when that cash flow ball stops spinning, it chokes them out and they go out of business. But for us, if we just bought another embroidery machine, because that embroidery has been expanding a lot for us. I don't know. It just depends on how efficient we can be. We definitely look at a lot of things. A lot of our expenditures are based on can we get more done without more people if we buy this machine? If you buy a direct to screen, you can get way more screens done in a day than you would if you had film. We bought automatic reclaim, which gets screens cleaned a lot faster, and also takes away the part where they have to spray chemicals in their face, which is not good. If we buy another automatic press and we have to pay a loan on that press, maybe that loan amount is $1,000 a month, but if it can eliminate the need for one more person, a person making $10 an hour, that's after taxes and benefits and all that stuff, is about $2,500 a month for us. Mm-hmm. And so automatic press is a lot cheaper, so sure. I would rather keep it a nice tight knit group of people and then have this a million people working here. We've tried to make those decisions based on staffing versus equipment, but yeah, it's a delicate balance. One thing that you can do if business gets really slow is you can lay off a person, which we hate doing, but you cannot just stop paying for a press for 2 months, so you have that balance too, and so it's hard to figure out what the proper thing to do is, but we definitely try to look at the ROI of everything and see if having this piece of equipment is having this loan cheaper than having another person.
Gotcha. Fast forward to today, though. Where are you guys at company-wise today? Presses, if you can disclose revenue-ish. You talked about people, just about 25.
Yeah, so we have 4 automatic presses, and then we have one of those little ASPE rapid tags. Mm-hmm. So I like to say we have 4 1/4 presses. At every trade show, this is how screen printers size each other up. They're like, how many presses you have?
Right, right.
I got 4 1/4. What about you? And then we've got 11 heads of embroidery now. We have we do some digital printing, like banners and stuff. Okay. And then, it's about 25 people. We have a fulfillment side of the warehouse as well. So we do some pick, pack, and pull for our pick, pack, and ship for people. And then we do about $3.5 million in revenue.
Okay. What do you feel like is your mindset around more growth, right? Because a lot of business owners is always focused on how do we grow more and more and more each year. But there's an interesting thought process around not doing that, like kind of questioning that method and just focusing more on just profitability and, like you said, having a really great team. What do you think about that? Where are you steering Printed Threads in that realm?
So what I want to do is have the most amount of revenue as we can without busting out of the walls that we're in right now. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of like daily, we're figuring that out better and better each day. I actually had a conversation with somebody. There's a guy in our industry named Greg Kitson that a lot of you guys probably know. We were sitting down talking the other day, and he was saying how kind of being in that like 2 to 3 million range is a hard place for print shops. He's seen a lot of businesses go out of business that sit in that range. And I asked him, like, what is the benchmark, because like, $1 million is a great place for a print shop to be. That is a super safe place. You can operate with a fairly small staff, and you don't have to worry about a whole lot. I think that we probably need to be more like 4.5, right around there, to be like in our really safe spot, because that would be us being able to be as efficient as we can be in our current location. Without having to buy more presses and all that stuff. What happens to a lot of companies is they keep growing their sales numbers, and as they grow their sales numbers, they have to buy more presses, and they keep growing and growing and growing, and then they get to a point where they're so big that like they have to feed that monster. And so when you talk to someone that has 8, 10, 12, 16 presses, like a lot of times, you can ask them that question, do you ever wish you were smaller? And sometimes like, they're like, yeah, man, I wish we would have stayed at 4 presses, or I wish we would have stayed at 2 presses, or whatever that is. So that's always really insightful. For us, I think the ability to grow at this point has a lot to do with our branding and market placement. But also, we're living in this world where everybody is terrified of Amazon, right? And so how do we beat Amazon? If we have really great customer service and we can deliver like a good conversation to our customers, well, that's one way to beat them, like mm-hmm. You go to return something on Amazon, you click a button, if you want to return something on Amazon, it's been 31 days, there's no button and there's no one to talk to. Right. Mm-hmm. So there's for, companies that are not going to be a massive internet store, like being able to deliver fantastic customer service, to be at events, to be around people. I've listened to a lot of those How I Built This podcasts.
Yeah,
When
Guy
they,
Raz and
yeah. So it's funny because my kids like quote it now all the time because they'll be in the back of the car listening. There was, gosh, I can't remember who said it, but he was saying, if you want great opportunities, get off your couch, just go be places. And, if you're at a bar, if you're at a restaurant, if you're out in the general public where hundreds and thousands of people are walking around, your opportunity to meet someone that's going to help you grow your business is a whole lot greater than just sitting on your couch, right?
sure.
And so that's opportunity, like I can't tell you how many customers that we've gained because I was sitting at a bar one night talking with some friends, and one of their friends was there, and we got to talking about what we do, and suddenly they're the marketing director for some giant restaurant chain, and I'm a screen printer, and we can become friends and be their delivery source of t-shirts.
For sure.
Like we can sit here and stare at our computer screens all night long trying to figure out how to make the sales numbers grow. But if you're not out there and active and engaging with people and like delivering a smile, that's a huge one, by the way. Like when people come take a tour of the print shop and they see people smiling, that's like, oh, wow, this looks like a good place, to work or a good place to do business with because like they're not whipping their employees or whatever.
Sure. Yeah, that's awesome. I like that. Focusing on delivering a smile, being out there and creating opportunities. That's a amazing podcast as well. I also try to listen to as many as possible of them. I guess I'm curious too, as far as 2 to 3 million tough spot you're talking about. So is that just because the managing cash flow at that size is hard, or is it the balance of people having to scale with all the kind of different assets you've got going on, right? Like if you're renting, you've got the payments on the presses, you've got everything else going on that increases, or why is it a difficult zone?
This is probably something that we could tag team in Mark Coudray or somebody to talk about, like, because they probably have physically seen it a lot more. I haven't really gone and studied the P&Ls of a bunch of different print shops our size or anything. But what I do know is growing is extremely expensive, right? So when you're going and doubling the size of your shop, you've got to buy more presses. Now you've got more payments, you've got more people, and you got to buy more shirts. And suddenly, when that cash flow ball stops, if you don't get from 2.5 million to 3.5 million to 4 or whatever, when that cash flow ball stops rolling, then like, oh my gosh, I've got all these bills to pay and I don't have money to pay it. Mm-hmm. And so that's probably kind of the big concern there. You also have to consider, like, we're going to have a certain amount of attrition, right? So, like, we're going to have a clothing line that we print for several years that's really big, and then suddenly they're not fashionable anymore. They're not on trend or something, and they go away. And that might have been like 20% of your business, and now you have to replace 20% of your business, or you piss off a client and they leave, or whatever happens. Like, how do we replace? It's a lot easier to replace $10,000 a year in business than it is to replace $500,000 a year in business. That could be a part of it too. I've heard it said. There's a really good saying, something like "Big clients build egos, small clients pay bills." And that's true because you get these big clients, right? And you're all excited because you're a bigger company, you have the capacity to do it, but your margin on these giant clients is really skinny. What happens when they pay their bills at 90 days instead of 30 days?
Sure.
Well, they can do it because they can strong arm you because they're a giant company, but do you have the amount of money to pay the interest on that 90-day bill? Probably not,
Right.
But especially when that bill's $100,000, right?
Right. That's crazy. Is that a personal story too, or?
Not necessarily, but that's something that we see a lot. Those bigger companies, you give them net 30 terms and they pay in 60 days. It's pretty regular, and it's hard, because you think about it, you might have net 30 with your t-shirt company, whoever your distributor is, but you have to buy the t-shirts before you print them, and you don't invoice the customer until they ship. Right. And so a lot of times your net 30 with that t-shirt has started 7 days before the shirt ships.
Sure.
Then
so
the shirt ships in that 30 days, and then they pay it 15, 20 days late. Well, now you're at 60 days and you were supposed to pay that net 30 bill, 30 days ago. Like, where do you get that money?
Right.
Especially most net 30 clients, what do? They order a whole lot of t-shirts, so you're sitting on these $20,000, $50,000 invoices hoping that they'll pay, and then they pay late.
Right. Yeah, I've also heard the story of they go bankrupt too, which is more unfortunate.
Absolutely. That's scary.
Yeah. That's super scary. I want to shift gears quickly because you mentioned something interesting too, where people walk around the shop and they've got smiles on their face working in the on the production floor in the front office. Your mindset around team and just creating a good culture. What do you think about, especially when you talk about you had a unique vision, especially early on, that didn't quite correlate with your dad's, who was your partner then too. Has that changed, and just what is it?
So early on, we had a really crappy logo. I didn't like it. And I had met a guy that does branding for a living, and we had become friends. We sat down, we're talking, and I was like, what would it look like to do a branding project? And he's like, well, we got to do a bunch of research, figure out what you like, what really represents your personality well. And, the time and the work entailed there is probably about a $2,000 to $10,000 project, And I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't have that much money,
Yeah, it's a lot early on.
Screen printer that doesn't even pay himself, right? So I walked away from that comment with a little bit of sticker shock, but I just thought about it more and more. Like, what does your brand represent? Like how much is the Nike swoosh worth, right? The deal is like it took 2 seconds to draw the Nike swoosh, right? Mm-hmm. But how much is that brand worth now? I think that brand is worth like $26 billion or something like that. Mm-hmm. So like how much is the Nike swoosh worth? It's worth a lot. And so this is like the face of your company. You're birthing a child, By the way, children aren't cheap to have. And so you're birthing this child, and you want it to look good. You want your baby to be pretty, So you hire a professional to come in, ask you questions about who you are, your personality, like what do you like? What are your interests? What kind of customers do you want to serve? They ask all those questions, and then they can go take that back to the drawing board and sketch up a bunch of things and come back to you and present you with this is who you are now. And so that's what happened. We came back to the drawing board with 5 different sketches and different logos, and he pulled out the one that was ours, and I was like, that one speaks to me. I love that. I love that aesthetic. And then he pulled out a little mascot, which we have. His name is Petey, and because that's actually the initials of our company. And so it's a little guy with a squeegee head, and he's kind of got that look from the 50s, like the gas station mascot or whatever you might attribute that to. And that really represented our brand, because if you look at the Printed Threads logo, it's very serious and artistic, right? But then you look at Petey, our mascot, and he has a smile on his face, and he's like cute and fun, right? So, and that really represented our brand really well, because I want to work hard and I want to be serious and I want to deliver the best product that we possibly can, but I want to have fun while we're doing it, right? Because if we're not having fun, like, what's the point of owning your own business? Like, no one sits down and says, hey, man, you know what? I'm going to start another business so that I can just be miserable, right?
Right.
The whole goal is, for me was I want to go have fun with my friends and enjoy the people that I work with and enjoy the work that I do and enjoy the customers that I'm around. And so that's what we did. And so now, like, we look around the room and you look around and say, like, wow, it's so cool when it's lunch break and, like, 10 people leave together and they go eat lunch together. It's like, wow, we've created this thing where, like, people enjoy coming to work because they're excited to be with each other, That's awesome, because if they want to be with each other and they want to hang out together, they're also going to help each other out. So that day when we're super, super busy and one press operator is printing 5,000 shirts, the other press operators, when they free up, they're going to go over and help too. They're going to grab ink buckets. So they're going to do whatever they can to help each other out. And that's really important. And like seeing people smile, even when they're stressful, like our production manager, she's smiling all the time, right? That's so important. It makes you feel good, right? It makes everyone around her feel good. And then, taking your brand and making it something that all of those people that work here are proud of is amazing. We take t-shirts for granted at this point because we print so many t-shirts every day. But when you see everybody on the weekend or whatever walk out like wearing a Printed Threads shirt or a Printed Threads hoodie, what does that say? It says they're proud of the company that they work for. They want to wear that Printed Threads brand in front of all their friends and everything. And that feels really good. But you can't do that unless you have a cool brand, right? Like no one's going to wear like some cheesy, crappy. I mean, some people wear, but like you see, like you'll see like some logo just in a really bad font or whatever, and like people aren't just going to wear that everywhere. Like we've had experiences recently where there's a really big band called Manchester Orchestra, and they just put out a documentary about making their new record. One of my buddies sent me the link to their documentary, and he says, "Hey, look at it at the 17-minute mark," and the drummer of the band turns around with a hat on, and it's a Printed Threads Threads hat, or
That's
like,
awesome.
MXPX put a new music video out for a single called Let's Ride earlier this year. And I'm watching the video, and, the singer, Mike Herrera, is wearing a Printed Threads hoodie. And it's like, wait, we have not only created a brand that our employees are proud of, we have created a brand that like rock stars are willing to wear in their music videos. And that's a pretty cool statement.
That's awesome. So going back to the beginning, did you end up using him to help you create that brand then?
Oh, absolutely. So this is what I did. I said,
Okay.
listen, man, I don't have $2,000. I certainly don't have $10,000. But what I can do for you is I have $700 cash in my bank account. I'll give you that $700, and then I'll give you $1,000 credit to use over the next year to make T-shirts, right? What do designers like to do? They love designing T-shirts. They love printing T-shirts and selling T-shirts, right? And so that was a really cool way to work it out. And I kind of was like, dude, I can't like just go make that $1,000 worth of T-shirts for you tomorrow, but maybe you can order like 100 at a time each month or something like that. That really helped me out, and it helped him out. And it ended up being a really cool relationship. We're still very close friends. We do a lot of work with each other. It's funny because we have a creative director here, and a lot of times they'll compete with each other over logos and stuff.
Sure.
So actually, ThreadX, which is a conference that I'm involved with for SGIA, like this guy, the same guy that did our branding, did the SGIA ThreadX branding, and our designers were competing over it. And it's just kind of a fun relationship. And we did a lot with the brand, right? That's what a branding guy wants to see, is you doing putting a lot of effort into the brand, getting the brand out there. Because if you're in the DFW area, you've probably seen Printed Threads somewhere at an event or something else. We've got our van wrapped. We have the brand everywhere. If you can utilize the brand really well, that makes him look really good too. So a lot of the restaurants that we work with or whoever says, hey, who did your branding? We love that. And then maybe they use him to do their branding as well.
That's awesome. What's his name?
His name is Paul Sermon,
Okay.
and he has an agency called Buzz Bomb Creative.
Got it. Awesome. Very cool. Yeah, love this stuff. What about the mascot? That's very interesting. You don't see that a whole lot either. Was it just like you liked it right then, or was there like, hey, it'd be cool to have this to put on instead of the logo in different places?
He actually presented it at the same time. He was like, hey, I just drew this too. What do you think? And at the time when he was kind of doing his research, asking me the questions, what do you like? What do you want to represent? I kind of went back to this, like, I really like that, 50s, 60s era where like cars were made out of steel. You know what I mean? This where everything was overbuilt and beyond good quality, all those things. And so he really took that. And so when he made our logo, and he was drawing it up and he was thinking about the 50s, like old labels, he drew up that logo, and then it just came into his mind that, in that period of time, a lot of companies had mascots. And so he drew up that little mascot, and it just was like, perfect. Oh, this totally fits our personality. It's fun. It makes, we put him on the side of all our boxes and everything. And I feel like it makes us a little bit more presentable or approachable, because we can be a really serious company, but you see like our little bit of fun and funniness. And then you feel like, oh man, these guys are fun and they're approachable. And we take that kind of fun part and we deliver it through our entire process. So like, whenever you get our box on the side, it says another swell product from Printed Threads, and you open it up, and we've tried to pack all the shirts very beautifully inside the box, but you always get a gift, whether it's playing cards, or one of my favorite ones that we've done in the last couple of years is a balsa wood airplanes, and you see like a grown man put together this balsa wood airplane and start playing with it, and it's like, oh man, we've just injected a little bit of fun into that guy's day, and I think that that's really cool.
That's awesome. So you talked about putting the brand everywhere, and I had the opportunity to actually walk around your shop when we were at ISS Fort Worth. The brand literally is everywhere in the shop as well. You can't find a mug or a wall without a sticker or something on it. What's your thought process around that? Is it just like, hey, this would be cool to have, this would be cool to have? Or is it like, is it part of the culture, or, what are you thinking about?
Well, it's certainly part of the culture. One thing that we do every year is we give every one of our people a hoodie with a different design, has a different design every year, Printed Threads design. And what happens is you'll see all of us go to lunch, right? And everybody's wearing a black hoodie. Almost everybody wears black pants too here, which is funny. So everybody's wearing black pants and a black hoodie. And what it looks like, I got a text message from a friend one day that said, hey, it looks like all the printed threads people are at this place to eat today. It looks like Warped Tour in there, you know? And it's true. Like, we're all old rock band guys, you know? And so, like, we love, for whatever reason, we wear black shirts and black pants all the time. I can't explain it. It looks like a uniform, but it's totally unintentional. And so, like, we just wear that brand. I think everybody's really proud of it. You know, it gets people excited. We've got these core values that are driven by the craft, passion for progress, product at the right time, and be thoughtful. And we plaster those everywhere, right? You know, you see driven by the craft all over our shop because that's who we are. And that's, you know, what we can relate to. Like, everybody here loves what they do. And so that in that way, they're driven by the craft. And I don't know, I just think that if you can make a place look cool, it feels good too. You know, it's like walking to your house at the end of the day and it's really messy. It kind of stresses you out a little bit, right? But if you can walk into a place that looks really cool, you're like, man, this feels good to me. I like working here.
For sure. That's awesome. Very cool. It's awesome just seeing how far you push it. I mean, that's one thing that I want to do more of. I feel like we're just getting started, but just everywhere. And, you know, it's like your jersey, right? It's like, you know, basketball player's not going to go on the court without his jersey, and you guys seem to emulate the same thing.
Yeah, it makes that team atmosphere. It makes it a family, and that's really important to us. You know, we do a lot of family activities. Once a month, we go out to lunch together to kind of celebrate everybody's birthdays. Once a quarter, we go out and have a fun activity. Like the night after the ISS show, we all went and threw axes at wooden targets, or we'll go play whirly ball, which is basically playing lacrosse and bumper cars. And so we go do fun activities together where we all get together, and it doesn't matter if you're a press operator or the art department or the owner of the company. We're all in it together, like as a team. And I think that makes it feel really good. You know, you want to be able to work at a place where everybody really appreciates each other.
For sure. That's awesome, Brett. Well, you actually just already covered my last one, which is team. But that's great. I mean, I think this is all so helpful. You know, just being able to take kind of the non-tangibles. I think sometimes we focus too much on just numbers and pushing things forward and growth, but taking those non-tangibles and really creating a quality company that you want to be around for a long time, that you want people to work for. Ryan actually shared this really cool video about, it was a guy who ran HR for LinkedIn for a while. Basically was talking about how people are just your biggest investment, right? But we don't always treat it as such, right? You spend so much time finding people and then hiring them and training them, and then some leave, and then you know, but we don't spend nearly enough time on that versus just the quick wins, quick win. But that's awesome to see that you guys are really focused on that. I loved being there and seeing that with the branding. Actually, a lot of the guys from Printavo there brought their shirts home and they were wearing them out when we went out to the bars and stuff afterwards. So very cool and really great takeaways, Brett. Is there some sort of blog that you read a lot or book that you're reading that has a really good kind of mindset you're trying to learn from?
Yeah, man. Like I said, I've been listening to all those NPR How I Built This podcasts. Those are really cool and really special because it's very humanizing. You realize that everybody kind of gone through the same struggles as you, which, you know, there's a saying, it's really lonely at the top. So if you're the CEO or the owner of a company, you know, you can't really share your struggles with your employees. And sometimes you feel like you can't share them with maybe your spouse because you don't want everybody around you to be scared. And so you keep it all in. But learning from other people that they have they're going through the same struggles as you are is I think really cool, you know, important. The book that I am listening to right now, because I'm terrible at reading, just about finished reading a book called The Culture Code, which is a lot about what we were just talking about, but basically how culture is so important. Actually, if you've listened to, I listened to last night the How I Built This with, what's his name? The dude that started Zappos. And, he's one of those guys that's really big in the culture arena. My favorite book of all time, and will probably always be my favorite book, I read last year when it's like a year and a half ago, I was going through a really hard time where we had to lay off a bunch of people because sales were bad. And I read the book Shoe Dog, which is it was written by the owner of Nike, Phil Knight. And that is probably the most humanizing book ever. I mean, he's talking about all the struggles that Nike had. You can't even imagine Nike not existing now, but there were a lot of times in the 80s where they nearly didn't exist. So kind of reading about other entrepreneurs, I think, is really, really good. You know, what you learn from most of those is that persistence is the key, you know, like we're all going to struggle with things, but man, have really smart people around you, have really encouraging people around you. Have very creative people around you. You'll do great things. Listening, being humble, so much that you can learn from people that have never even done the things that you think that you've done. Like I teach all these classes to small print shops, and someone will be like, "Why don't you do this?" And I'll be like, "I don't know. It's a really good idea." It's like, always be open-minded to people's ideas, everyone around you. And I definitely recommend that if you're a business owner, you get involved in some sort of business group, or at least go grab beers with other business owners on a regular basis, because it's almost like you were like going to a counselor or something like that. You can kind of lament about all the hard things, and they're like, "Yeah, man, we're right there with you." And sometimes it feels like you're all alone on an island. So I think it's really important to be around those types of people.
For sure. That's awesome, Brett. Well, I really appreciate your time. This has been incredible. I think it's going to help a lot of people too. So thank you so much for your time. Truly
Yeah, man,
appreciate
thanks
it.
for having me. We'll see you
Absolutely.
in Vegas.
Yes, we'll do.
All right, man.
Bye, Brett.
Bye.